אוקיי, שלום לכולם, לכל מי שהצטרף אלינו. יש לנו גם נציגות פה. יש לנו גם נציגות פה בתוך האודיטוריום. נצא לדרך. Honored family members, colleagues, guests, and students, we have gathered here today to honor a special woman who was very active in social justice, furthering the advancement of women in general and in particular in the Torah world. Belda Kaufman Lindenbaum embodied in her personality the pasuk that described Avraham Avinu, כי ידעתיו למען אשר יצווה את בניו ואת ביתו אחריו, ושמרו דרך השם לעשות צדקה ומשפט. For I have known him to the end that he may command his children and his household after him, that they may keep the way of Hashem to do righteousness and justice. The Midrasha's special auditorium was generously built by the Lindenbaum family and in memory of Belda. Usually, this auditorium would be used to host many Torah-related activities. There would be conferences, seminars, and events about the holidays and the issues that we face in society. This year, unfortunately, we, as the rest of the world, were forced to teach virtually. After a year and a half of trying to convey important messages and teachings via the computer, I must say that it was not ideal. There is nothing like teaching face-to-face. I'm looking forward to returning next year to the lively atmosphere of learning in the Midrasha building and hope that the next year memorial will be held in the auditorium. Right before the pandemic broke out, we were in contact with the Lindenbaum family in order to organize the memorial lecture. Little did we know what was around the corner. Due to the pandemic, along with the security situation here in Israel, we had to get organized quickly and decided to hold the memorial on Zoom. It was important for us to have the memorial even if the setting is less than ideal. Dear students, in Masechet Shabbat, our rabbis teach us that one who gives a gift to his friend must inform him. הנותן מתנה לחברו חייב להודיעו. A person who gives a gift must tell his friend, as it says. Similarly, one who gives food to a child must inform his mother. הנותן פת לתינוק צריך להודיע לאמו. Why is this so? Due to the fact that the basic ethical tenet is to give thanks. We are called Yehudim, and in the morning we say Modeh Ani, like the word Toda. Because this is the basis for everything. Our rabbis learn this from the Torah. When Hashem gives the Jewish people the Shabbat, he tells Moshe, go and tell them, Lech ve'odiem. Moshe has to tell the people how great the gift is and who gave it to them. When someone gives thanks for the little things in life, then he is better able to appreciate the larger gifts he receives, including the spiritual gifts in his life. We all owe a great show appreciation to the Lindenbaum family. They gave us the wonderful possibility to learn Torah on the university campus, to be able to synthesize Torah learning and academia, to create wonderful female role models who can advance in both worlds. As graduate of the Midrasha and the law faculty in Bar-Ilan, I can say how influential the Midrasha was in my life. And I'm forever grateful for this opportunity. It could not happen elsewhere. I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you. Thank you to Belda and all the women who worked tirelessly to promote women in academia who are also influential and knowledgeable the Torah. It's my fervent hope that we will be able to walk the path that Belda forged and help our students to reach their potential, and all the while being a large part of Tikkun Olam. We would like to begin the evening with some words of memorial from the family representative, Belda's daughter, Abigail. One moment.
My name is Abigail Lindenbaum Tambor. Thank you so much for being here today to memorialize my mother, Belda Kaufman Lindenbaum. Many thanks to Bar-Ilan and the Midrasha for doing their part to keep my mother's memory and efforts. We're so honored to have Dr. Genzel and Rabbanit Evron here today to share their wisdom in her name. My mother loved Orthodox Judaism. The evidence was always there. Her dedicated synagogue attendance, the traditional Judaica that graced her home, the long Shabbat and festival meals filled with people and food and Torah-fueled conversation, the time she spent promoting Orthodoxy's future and well-being. Yet as she often told her children, her love was never unconditional. There were high expectations that needed to be met. To her, the mission was clear. Rather than allowing the focus to remain on the limited view of Orthodoxy's self-proclaimed leaders and the corridors of learning and leadership must be opened up to new voices, bold and courageous. My mother was brought up in a traditional, modern Orthodox home where laws were strictly observed and gender norms were largely unquestioned. It was a home full of love of family, love of Torah, love of learning, and all of that love was braided together inextricably. In that home, education was paramount, and all were expected to approach the world knowledgeably and with thoughtful questions. There, outspokenness was a virtue, argument a skill, and Torah belonged to all. It was a home to be envied, and one my mother forever strove to replicate. For her, this was what modern Orthodoxy should and could look like. This is what led her to leadership at Bar-Ilan, following in her father's footsteps onto the American board of this institution that brought together her values of higher learning, love of Israel, and dedication to Jewish life. But as much as my mother was motivated by love, she was also motivated by a deep sense of justice. It is no exaggeration to say that she considered a tragedy to leave modern Orthodoxy in the hands of those who saw only its limitations, who saw the Torah as mired in the past, who would not allow it to come again and again to its full potential. The world was finally beginning to wake up and see the potential of women to effect change, to lead and to teach at the highest levels. For Orthodoxy to truly be a light unto the nations, it had to bring out the best in its adherents, seeking leadership, brilliance, and inspiration from its best and its brightest, not just its men. Women should not be forced to seek education and leadership opportunities outside of their own tradition, but should have Orthodox institutions devoted to their education, their betterment, and their enrichment. And with Torah on their tongues, these women could lift up their voices and be heard. Many refer to the entrance of women into the upper echelons of Jewish learning and leadership as a paradigm shift. My mother saw it as an inevitability without which the viability of Orthodoxy would be threatened. But with the women needed to come new ideas, new approaches, a re-examination of assumptions, and a realignment of values to ensure that the Torah and Halakha were in fact living and breathing for every generation. The new leadership should challenge and revitalize the status quo and raise everyone up. To merely fit into the norm and perpetuate the status quo would not be success, but a missed opportunity. This was not simply about women's leadership. This was about the best leadership, be it a man or a woman. Ultimately, I believe my mother's dream will be fulfilled when panels such as these, exploring theory and practice of women's leadership, will no longer be necessary, because the theory and the practice will be obvious and indistinguishable. Women are and will be learned. Their level of learning and ability to apply it is and will continue to be recognized, respected, and elevated. It will be directly named and appreciated and compensated, and that will simply be the practice. These times are upon us and are now, if we simply allow them to be. May we and the entire Jewish world be blessed with learned, compassionate, visionary leaders who feel called to their role to embrace it fully and bravely. This was the dream and the work of Belda Lindenbaum. Yehi Zichra Baruch.
Thanks. Now we would like to hear firsthand from a student in the Midrasha. She will be speaking about combining Torah in her academic life and share some thoughts on the future of women in the world of Torah. Bat-El Katan is a MA student in English education and in the Midrasha. Bat-El.
Hi, thank you. One second. Okay, I would first really like to thank our director of Midrasha, Dr. Leah Wiesel, and her assistant, Dr. Nama Sat, for asking me to speak tonight for that special opportunity. In one of my classes this past week, we learned about the prophet Hulda, which is a topic I've never encountered before. She prophesied during the time of Yirmiyahu, which was just several years before the Churban of the first Beit HaMikdash. During that time, they were doing some renovations for the Beit HaMikdash, and they found a Sefer Torah that was opened in Sefer Devarim on a prophecy about Churban. Yoshiyahu, who was the king of Yehuda during that time, wanted to seek Hashem and understand what that meant, and he sent some of his people to Hulda. The Gemara in Masechet Megillah tries to understand why he sent his people to her and not to Yirmiyahu, who was the obvious choice. There are many answers. The one that I liked most, and we talked about in class, was that the Gemara says that women are compassionate. Now, some people may not like that answer, but it really spoke to me because in my opinion, what makes women so special is that they bring their personality, their intuition, and their compassion to every aspect of their lives. Yoshiyahu knew that finding that Sefer Torah meant, leading them to Churban and destruction, and he wanted someone, a prophecy, who would give them also hope and consolation. I've had the immense privilege to be able to sit and learn Torah during my studies at Bar-Ilan University. This is my third year studying at the Midrasha. We like to call it our little house on campus, and it truly is. This is the place where we have our lunch and meet in between classes, but most importantly, it's where we grow as Jewish women. The Midrasha has helped me and many other students find the right balance between our academic studies and Torah learning. It made me realize that I can have them both in my life and that I really want to. At the Midrasha, something that was very special to me and to many other girls was the women who taught us. And these are such special women who truly live Torah. Each one of them such a role model for what it means to be a Jewish woman. And yet their Torah learning hasn't affected their academic progress. On the contrary, so many of them, most of them have college degrees, even doctorates. Their knowledge in Torah and the way that they bring it to their lives is so inspiring. We have all gained role models who we can always turn to for help and for guidance, but we truly just strive to be them one day. True Talmidot Chachamim, true leaders. Just like Hulda was able to take the prophecy of Churban and find a glimpse of hope to help Am Yisrael go through that progress. I think so many women in our generation and in the past generations they bring their special qualities. They find the balance in our world between work and family, between Torah and academic studies, between keeping a firm hand and finding compassion. And I think that's what makes women so special. And hopefully one day, I can be able to achieve that level. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Thank you. And now we will move to the main lecture, which is a panel discussion between two very influential figures in women's Torah. I'm honored to invite Dr. Tova Ganzel, who until recently was the head of the Midrasha and continues to lecture here. Today, she is the head of Kramim, the Jewish Studies Honor Program in Bar-Ilan. I would also like to invite Rabbanit Dvora Evron, who recently got chosen for a Torah position on campus. She has been lecturing and teaching halacha for many years. She is a director of Or Torah Stones Institute of Halachic Leadership. Dr. Tova and Rabbanit Dvora will be discussing women's Torah leadership. Dvora and Tova.
Thank you, Leah, for this very nice, I would say, titles that you gave us. First, I want to say that I'm pretty excited to be here. I really feel like you had said previously, Leah, that we owe a big debt to the Lindenbaum family, to Marcel, especially to Belda, who the auditorium's named after. Not just for the donation of the auditorium, but really for the model they set for us, for the vision they saw. And I agree with what Abigail said, and it was the first thing I told Rabbanit Dvora when we were discussing our panel tonight. I told her, we're really going to discuss women's leadership in the Torah world again? Aren't we, haven't we had it? I mean, isn't it already trivial? So a few more minutes of conversation, and well convinced me that being in a rabbinic position on campus is still not trivial. It's the first time in Israel, and that's something that's worthwhile for us all to stop and discuss. So what we will do tonight is really a conversation between Rabbanit Dvora Evron and I about the role that she took upon herself, or she was asked to take upon herself, her vision, where she would want to see the role evolving to, and why do we, and I think the main question that I hope we'll try to answer here is the challenge that Abigail put to us when she was speaking, which is it still necessary to talk about women's leadership? So as a teaser, I'll say that I picked this up yesterday. I don't know if you could see, in the book fair, in the Shavua Sefer Ivri. I don't know if you can see, but it has Rabbanit Dvora Evron's picture on the cover. It's a woman's journal. That's part of the problem, if you ask me, that it's a woman's journal and not geared for men too. But anyway, the title was Torah Ba'Akademia. And it's an interview with Rabbanit Dvora Evron about her position. I would want to go beyond what the interviewer asked, but I guess yesterday when I saw it, it was about midnight, and I was telling myself, okay, if it's still worth it, a cover on a woman's journals magazine, and I guess it's still news and it's still something we have to talk about. So I found myself through this journal getting an answer to my question. So without further ado, Rabbanit Dvora, I would appreciate if the first thing you can do is really introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your biography, where you came to this position from, just so people that really aren't familiar with the Israeli network and maybe are abroad, maybe just don't know where, aren't familiar with what happens up north. Sometimes we feel like anything that doesn't happen in Bar-Ilan or anything that doesn't happen in Jerusalem doesn't exist. So just give us a feeling of where you're from, what have you done in your past, a little bit about your family, just so we get to know you. Thanks.
Thank you. Before I say something about myself, I do want to say that I'm really honored to speak at this memorial for Belda Lindenbaum. I was very fortunate and had a great zchut to know Belda and Marcel, to be at their home. I even studied for an exam in halacha at their house because Belda learned that I had an exam and I had a few hours to spare, so she invited me to study there. And they both are a great inspiration and continue to be an inspiration for Torah learning, for women's Torah learning, and for women's leadership. I was born in the States, but made Aliyah very, very early on as a child with my parents, of course, and grew up in Israel. And in the Mamlachti Dati world, and when I got out of the army, which was not so common for a Dati girl to go to the army, but I did go, and that's a whole other story. When I got out of the army, I looked for a place to learn Torah, and there were no midrashot yet. No midrashet Lindenbaum and no midrashet Nishmat or Migdalos, and the only midrasha that was working already and was open and was serious was here at Bar-Ilan, and that was a huge factor in my decision to come to Bar-Ilan. And I studied at the midrasha at Bar-Ilan throughout my BA. And I'm very happy that I did so, because it really created a base for my Torah learning. And I have to say that when after graduating, I made sure throughout my adult life to have a chavruta and to continue studying, even though my career track went towards teaching, first in high school, and then I continued to, I'm a psychodrama therapist, and I worked on a psychiatric ward for quite a few years. And throughout my life, I had one foot in therapy and one foot in Torah. And then I decided to do my master's, and I did my master's in gender studies. And that actually brought me to work in Nigun Nashim up north. I live up north, even though I work at Bar-Ilan and in Jerusalem, which is a whole other story. But Nigun Nashim is a bet midrash for religious and non-religious women from all over the north of Israel. And it really was a very big step into the leadership, into Jewish leadership, into Jewish pluralistic leadership in Israel. A few years into that, I realized that what I really wanted to do is to go back to Torah learning and to study halacha, which was always a something that I really wanted to do. It was something that I loved doing, and I also realized that the only way to really gain leadership in Orthodoxy and in the modern Orthodox world is to be knowledgeable in halacha. Because I think, as Abigail said, it's not only the knowledge of halacha and being able to be part of the discourse, but it is also knowing enough to bring your own voice to the table and your own point of view to the table. And so I studied halacha at Bet Morasha in Jerusalem for 6 years. I took his exams, both oral and written exams, and I covered all the material that that men cover in order to be recognized as rabbis, and in order to be able to answer in halacha. And then a few years later, I was called upon to direct the Ortoro Stone, Susie Bradfield's Women's Institute of Halachic Leadership, which is an institute where women are trained and take exams and become teachers of halacha, morot halacha, and spiritual leaders. A year ago, a little over a year ago, I was approached by the head of Bar-Ilan University to come to the campus and fulfill a rabbinical role on the campus, bringing a feminist Torah voice to the campus, both to be an address for men and women on campus, students, teachers, etc., that are searching for a voice, such a voice to, and such a person to confer with, to talk to, and also to bring this voice to the public sphere of the campus. Conferences, memorials such as this. I just met with the board of directors and other places. So this is me, and this is how I'm here.
Dvora, one note about your family, please, just so we have a larger picture. I know you just had a granddaughter on Shabbat, and you deserve a big mazel tov, and you had another son on Thursday who went through some stage in the army. I'm not even sure what, because I'm not familiar with all the stages. But tell us a little bit about your family too, please.
So I'm married to Yuval. This summer, Bezrat Hashem, will celebrate 35 years of marriage. And we have 4 children. 3 are married, and the youngest is in the army now, and he's not married yet. And Bli Ayin Hara, K'nai Nahara, we have 7 grandchildren. And the youngest, Tamara, was just born yesterday.
Mazal tov.
Wow.
So thank you for giving us like that full picture. Much appreciated. I know that if this was a men's panel, they probably would have skipped that question, but we're beyond that already. We don't apologize. So I will move on, and I'll ask, since you've already been around for a year, almost a year, it's hard to say because it was a hard year and we were virtually not on campus for most of it, but maybe you can share with us a brief anecdote, story, something that that'll just give us the feel of what it's like to be Harabbanit Dvora Evron on the campus of Bar-Ilan University.
So if it's okay, I'll give you 2 short anecdotes.
Go for it.
One, a few months ago, I got a phone call from a student on campus that just found out that there was something wrong with her giyur that she went through. She went through a giyur in a certain place. We're not going to go into details. And she got a notice from the Beit Din that there was some problem. And she really didn't know what to do. And she didn't know who she could call. And she called me. So I listened to her. I tried to understand, what the problem was. I asked her where she went through the giyur, etc. And then I made a few phone calls. One of the phone calls was to the Rav of the campus, who, Rav Shlomo Shefer, who is very knowledgeable and has a lot of experience. And it was very important that I talked to him, both to learn from his experience and to learn more about what's on campus. I also called the organization that she had gone through the giyur and actually found someone that could really help her and that knew about such problems. And so Bezrat Hashem, in a couple of weeks, all this will be behind her because she really wanted to go through the giyur, and she found an answer to her problems, not only through me that I could help her, but she felt that there was someone that she could call. And with my experience, I understood who else I needed to contact. The other example I wanted to give is something that actually happened a few days ago. there's a professor on campus that is being honored with a prize for being for innovation in science. And she is an Israeli woman that grew up in Israel in the non-Orthodox community. And she sent me an email. I had met her there on a meeting that I had done, one of the many meetings and many Zoom meetings that I have done during this past year. She's part of the feminist forum that's on campus. There's a feminist forum of the professors on campus. And I met them and addressed them and listened to them and spoke to them and really wanted to get to know them. And that's how she got to know me. So she contacted me because we met. She sent me an email saying that she's being honored with this prize and that she has to speak. And when she thought about what she wanted to say, it dawned on her that she really wanted to bring something from Yahadut, from the Torah, from Judaism. And she asked me what I thought that she could say about innovation in science. And we decided to have a Zoom to talk about that. And I actually put together a number of resources, sources that I thought would be good. And even though I don't know, all the sources, but I have a group of an email of a Gmail group of women that you're part of it, and Rabbanit Leah is part of it, and Rabbanit Naama is part of the group. So I asked in the group if there are sources on innovation in science, and I got actually a few sources, and I looked at what I thought was good and was appropriate, for a question. And we sat for half an hour, a chavruta on Zoom, learning from the introduction to Emunot V'Adeot Shel Rabbi Saadia Gaon from the 9th century, and something from Rashbam, Rashi's grandson, from the 11th, 12th century. And we talked about it, and she put in a passage in her speech from the sources we talked about. And then at the end, she said to me, I want to study with you more. Please open a class for professors that do not have a background in Yahadut and Judaism that want to learn. So Be'ezrat Hashem, next semester, we're going to have such a class.
Wow, that's very exciting, Rabbanit Dvorah. That I would say that happened faster than I would imagine. I want to say that one of the last, I would say, conversations that I had with Belda was also at her house. So it was kind of controversial, I would say, was that she was, I guess we could say this by now, she was pretty upset that there wasn't appointed a woman to be a president of Bar-Ilan. She was a good friend and colleague of Professor Yafa Zilberschatz, and I think she really, I know because we had a conversation about it, she was really hoping to see a woman head the institution as a president. It's not like it exists in other universities in Israel, but she was really hoping to see it in Bar-Ilan. And when we were setting the program for tonight, I was wondering what would Belda say. I don't have an answer to your position, meaning would she say, well, there's still way to go? Do you have the authority that Rav Shefer has? How are you accepted? What were the objections? I'll ask you some of these questions in a minute. Or would she really see this as a great opportunity and say, okay, we're moving ahead? And in my mind, the conversation I held with Belda, in my mind, I thought to myself, she would say both. Meaning she would see very, very in a crystal clear way, also that there was a long way to go, but also that we moved ahead one more milestone. So I want to take this as a transition point to just ask you, were there any objections to your position in Bar-Ilan from within the campus, from without the campus? What kind of reactions did you get?
There were no objections. I mean, no, I can't say there were. I didn't hear it as objections, more as concerns. There definitely were concerns. I feel that people maybe didn't feel that they could object because it was a decision that was made at the highest levels of the university, the rector, the president, the CEO. So maybe people inside the campus realized that they couldn't really object, but they did talk about concerns. I think there were a number of concerns. One was, what would this do to Bar-Ilan? Would it send a message that Bar-Ilan is much more liberal, and then maybe there would be students that wouldn't come to the campus? Is this something that there's a consensus on campus about? Would my coming in mean that other people would need to give up some of their authority or some of the things that they're doing? Meaning, is there enough room? One of the concerns that I heard and I really listened to was, what are we saying to non-religious people that want to come to the campus when we double the religious roles on campus? What, it's not enough that there's one rabbi, we need another rabbanit on campus, meaning that maybe Bar-Ilan is becoming too religious. So yes, there were concerns. Probably a little less objections. Actually, I was very surprised by two things. One is that when the appointment was announced, I didn't hear that much objection even from outside Bar-Ilan University. For some reason, maybe because it was communicated really in a way where this does not come to replace the rabbi, and it does not come to undermine him, but it is something that is in addition, because there's a realization that it is needed. So there weren't that many objections even outside the campus, and I was surprised at the support that I was given, and people that spoke up in favor of this. Also, in the many conversations that I've had during the year with different people, and I've heard very few people that felt uncomfortable, and many people that said that they were happy about the appointment, that it's about time, that it is something that is needed on campus.
Were there any, I just want a follow-up question on that. Thanks so many to all. Were there any reactions that were specific? I mean, a lot of what you were saying, I think, would be true to any community that would put a rabbanit next to a rav, meaning the questions of if there's enough room for both, if how much of a spiritual leadership does a community need, and so on. And I'm asking if there's anything, I want to push you a little bit more and ask if there's anything that was specific to the academic setting that might have made people, you didn't want to use the word objections, or so I'll use the word concern, but that made people concerned, meaning this academic setting putting the rabbanit in. Something that you couldn't say about, for instance, the woman that you're training to become spiritual leaders of Batei Midrash or of Kehilot, communities.
I didn't meet that like conflict through concerns, but I do see that the question of where does something like this fit in is a question that other people ask and that I ask myself. Because if you participate in an academic conference and you're asked to speak in an academic conference, it's a different language when you bring a language of Torah, of Masoret, Midrash, etc. It's not an academic discourse. So how do you bring this kind of language into an academic discourse is something that I find myself concerned with. It's one thing to teach a class in Gemara or in Yahadut in general to academic people that are interested, and then talking about the difference between the academic language and the Gemara language, or the Rishonim or halachic language. But it's another thing when you're invited to speak at an academic conference. They want to hear your voice, but you also want to be relevant to what's been going on. In a couple of weeks, I've been invited to bring the closing remarks to an academic conference on against violence. Okay, there's an academic conference on violence and
women's violence, against women's violence.
No, not women's violence, against not even against. There's an academic conference on the connection or what happens. It's alimut b'yahadut. Is there violence? What does Judaism have to say about violence? Now it's an academic conference, and I'm invited to bring closing remarks to an academic conference. So I can't, it's difficult even for me to think ahead what I want to say, because I think what will be very important for me is to listen to the conference itself, to the things that people will be saying, and to see how it translates into a rabbinical voice.
I think thanks for that point, Rabbanito. I think that brings us to another, I think, very fundamental question, which is really, that stands behind or underneath, if I could say, what you're echoing now about what rabbinic voice do you bring at the end of an academic conference, which is really the relationship between Yirat Shamayim and, I would say, critical thinking, meaning we have two different fundamental assumptions when we look at the same texts, when we come from different perspectives. And the academic perspective is very, very much, is very clear. The fundamental assumption is that you can't assume anything, that you have to come with a critical way of thinking. And I would say that the whole discourse that takes place in an academic setting does its best. We can have a different conversation about does it succeed, but at least it's very vocal about doing its best to leave any beliefs someone have right out the door and closing the door behind it. And again, I said, I'm saying this knowing that it's not a fully a successful mission, but at least that's what the fundamental assumption would be. And as a Rabbanit, I think the first thing that you're actually asked to do is to bring a voice that clearly represents a world of faith, a world that God is present within, a world where tradition has a lot to say about who is the author of these texts and when they were written, how they were given to us, and for what purpose they were given to us. So I'd like to ask you, how do you deal with this relationship? Not only you gave us one aspect of how that you're not really sure how you'll end this conference, what words will you bring in, but I'm actually asking on two levels. First of all, on the personal level, the academic world is full of academics that really don't share the fundamental assumptions you share. At least that's what it would seem to be. And I would say on a higher level, in what way do you see a synthesis between your messages and the academic voice on the campus, intellectual academic voice that's on campus?
So one of the points in my biography that I left out was that my father went to Yeshiva University and my mother went to Stern College, meaning that I was born into and grew up in this synthesis or conflict between Torah and Madda. That is, you can see it on Bar-Ilan's symbol, right? The microscope with the Torah scroll. So this was something that I've lived in all my life, in this question of this synthesis. So I'll try to reflect on a number of points. You asked me how I speak to other people in my capacity, to other people that do not share maybe my basic beliefs or the point of view of Torah. This again is something that I've been doing for many, 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 many years. From the first Shabbat in the tent, in the army, when we put together a learning group of young women soldiers that we talked about our Jewish identity. Are we more Jewish or are we more Zionist, etc.? And one of the things that I've learned was that I think it's more important to realize what we can talk about and what we can learn together than realizing what we can't talk about and where our conflicts are. And it's like building blocks. The first block that we build on is what we share. And there's a lot in Torah and a lot in general philosophy that we share as religious and non-religious people, or as Jews from different spiritual and real backgrounds. And only then, after we create this this foundation of things that we believe in and shared knowledge that we have, can we start talking about conflicts, but talking about it out of respect. I realize that I have a point of view and other people have points of view, and I'm actually curious. Sometimes I find myself even more curious to listen to other points of view than I'd like to share my own. And being curious about it and talking about it, and then I feel that I can really bring myself and the things that I believe in. Another thing that I think that we can acknowledge is, first of all, that there are conflicts and there are differences in the logic and discourse of academia and the logic and discourse of Torah. And if we can master both kinds of knowledge and both kinds of logic, then we have a lot to gain. It does not mean that, that when, if I do something that in academia and I use academic tools, does not mean that I lose my faith in Hashem, or that my house is kosher in a different way, or even that the I can find sources of inspiration outside of the world of Torah, especially in places where I'm not, asked to believe in something else, but to use a different kind of logic. And I actually think that it's a great tool. It is also, I think, when I realize that I have a lot to learn in academia, then when I talk to academics, such as this professor that I studied with, and she realizes that I realize that she has a lot to teach me, then she realizes that maybe there's something that, that I can teach and that we can actually learn together. So I think maybe sum it up to three things. One is that we have a lot in common, and I think that we need to focus on what we have in common. The second is that we do have conflict, and I think that when that it's good for us to realize the conflict and to give it names, to realize it and to talk about it. And the third is that we can understand that we can learn from each other, and that learning from each other does not threaten who we are, but it actually can enhance our own identity even more when we realize what we share, what we don't share, and the respect that we have for each other and what we can learn from each other.
Thanks, Manitola. That sounded a lot like we were already going in onto your vision. So I'll take that as a turning point to ask you, maybe not for a vision, because I think we heard a lot of it. You can pull the pieces together. But something else about Belda was that she was very geared for results. She didn't appreciate people who, I don't know how to say this gently, Belda wasn't always gentle about it, but spoke a lot and did a little. She really wanted to see things changing and things happening. And I want to ask you maybe a hard question, because this is being recorded. And I want to ask you, if we meet in 3 or 5 years from now, you choose, what would you call success? Meaning, give me a few parameters that you'll tell me if we meet. Now you're just, into this transition mode of coming into the position, meeting the campus, meeting the professors, starting to make your position known and yourself known. What will you say here in 5 years and tell us, well, I succeeded if so-and-so, I failed if so-and-so?
It's a good question.
Sorry, I didn't promise to make your life easy.
No, it's fine. It's fine. If I wanted an easy life, I would not be a halachic feminist, believe me. Right now, this role is considered 1 day a week. It's a very, very part-time role. And I think that I'd see it as a success if in 3 or 5 years, myself doing it and of course the Bar-Ilan leadership would realize that this is something that is needed not only 1 day a week, but 3, 4, or 5 days a week, because it will be a role that more and more people, students, staff, etc., would realize that can be a resource for them. There'll be more professors calling. There'll be more students asking questions, more conferences that would like to hear this voice. It wouldn't necessarily be me. It may be someone else, but would want to hear this voice. Also,
hey, don't be so humble. You could say that we would want to hear more of you. That's okay too.
Yes, thank you. But I'm not being humble, actually, because I think that one of the signs of success will be when this role is not connected to a specific woman, but is actually a role that exists and that can be passed on to someone else. So it's not just being humble, it's also part of the practical vision that I would like to see. Another thing that I would like to see is I would like to be part of at least 3 or 4, I forgot the English word for a minute, פורומים קובעי מדיניות.
Forums that decide on the policies.
On policies on campus, right. Forums that decide on policies on different subjects on campus. For example, I'll give you an example from this morning. This morning, I spoke to the staff that is in charge of a summer camp for high school students that are coming to study science for 2 weeks on campus. It's called the Alpha program. It's for, it's a very advanced program. It's for high achievers,
It's a very prestigious program in Israel.
Right, for high school achievers. And for the first time, we're having it on Bar-Ilan, and the group is mixed, boys and girls, religious and non-religious, Dati and Chiloni. And they the staff realized that they do not know what to do on Shabbat, how to put Shabbat together. And then they remembered that I actually spoke to them a few months ago. So they called me and asked for my help to put together this Shabbat. I see that as a success because they realized that I could help. I would see it even as more of a success if I or someone in this role, and I'm not being humble, would be a part of the steering committee of this program in general, and be part of it from the beginning, and not only when this question arises. And there are other examples on campus. Another parameter of success would be to be part of the Tkasim, of the rituals, the regular Tkasim, regular rituals on campus. You know, giving the certificates, or Yom Ha'atzmaut, or Yom HaZikaron, or Yom HaShoah. When the campus realizes that this is a symbol, this role is a symbol of the campus that they would like to see as much as possible in the in the public sphere of the campus, then I think that would be a success as well.
Okay, so we're recorded, we're discussing a full-time position as opposed to 1 day. You're being humble about that because you're underpaid for 1 day, but okay. And we're talking about being part of the places where policies and decisions are made. And we're talking about being part of, I would say, the advisory committees to different I would say different events that happen on campus, whether it's hosting or not hosting. You didn't say something that they had here on the title, on the cover of this gilayon, of this or whatever you would call it, this woman's. I have such a resentful relationship to something that's only for women that I'm not even succeeding in demonstrating it in a polite way. But I will say that it says here in Hebrew, האם המינוי המרגש יהיה זרז למינוי נשים רבניות ומוסדות ציבור נוספים? Which means, will your appointment be something that will actually become a role model for other academic, but also not academic? It says here, במוסדות ציבור. מוסדות ציבור is a wide frame of, I mean, we're not talking about high schools because that's a given. We're not talking about midrashot, but we're talking about other places that are part of, I would say, the public sphere. Do you see that as something that's relevant to see if you succeeded? If other universities get up and say, Hebrew will say, or the Technion, or will say, wait a minute, we should also have a woman who's a spiritual leader on campus?
I would see it as a success. I would even see something as a success, even if the campus did not decide, you know, to have a fully spiritual leader on campus, but would look for women or would appoint women to different Jewish capacities on campus. For example, there are Batei Knesset, shuls, in meonot, in dormitories on different campuses. So I think that, and there are people that are in charge of these shuls. They're not the rabbis of the shul, but they are definitely people that you know, set the tone of the shiurim, of the tefillot, and they organize it. There's a community that is organized around such Batei Knesset. I would see it as a success if there's a woman who's appointed to, you know, organize that shul. I'm not even looking for you know, only specific roles. I think that any role on campuses, universities and colleges, any Jewish role that that up until now only men fulfilled, if women would come in and fulfill, I think that would be great. And also, even if it was side by side, that would be great as well. And without going into details, we're seeing it start to happen already.
Okay, I'm going to ask you two more questions. I hope you're okay. I'm looking at the watch. The first thing, and it comes out of what you were saying now, but it also came out of the article, and it was actually one of the sentences put in bold. You were quoted saying that putting a Rabbanit on campus mirrors the existing roles that women, or I would say leadership positions that women are taking in other areas in their life. So the campus should mirror the university. You called it לשקף בתוך האוניברסיטה, that the university should mirror what's happening outside of the university and be part of this greater conversation. You said that in different words now too. And I want to ask you something else. I want to ask you if this isn't a position that can actually be amud ha'esh lifnei ha'machane, meaning it doesn't only have to mirror, it might be a model for moving forward in ways that, at least the way I see it, have less tension because they're not strictly on shul, on Batei Knesset, where gender issues become very sensitive within the Orthodox world right away. Maybe it was my wishful thinking, but I was kind of hoping to hear from you more. I was kind of hoping to hear that these are exactly the kind of positions that should be less controversial and therefore can be take us another step forward from where we're standing today in the general public in America and in Israel and around the world of women's leadership. What do you think about that?
So first of all, I'm sorry I'm disappointing you. I think what we have to say, we have to give credit to Bar-Ilan University, because that was one of the main reasons that they asked me to come to fulfill this role. Bar-Ilan University decided to be the first university in Israel that has a woman in a rabbinical role on campus, hoping to set the tone for you know, bringing this for other campuses, and to bring this discourse and this leadership on on campus. So that's one of the things that I think that that we need to say. Another thing that I think we need to say is that a lot of the public sphere in Israel is political. And many of the places in Israel that have leadership have to do with political power. For example, about 6 years ago, the WHL, the institute that I direct today, positioned a woman in a hospital alongside the rabbi as an intern. She was there as an intern to study. And when the Minister of Health, Litzman, heard about it, he set a veto, and the hospital was told that if they do not stop this, then they would have to pay, they would pay, there would be consequences. And so the internship was stopped. This happened in other places as well. There were other places that wanted to have women in leadership positions because it was in places that are not the shul, not the community, but in old age homes, for example, etc. And again, we were stopped for political reasons. And so I think that Bar-Ilan University and other strong institutions that have enough clout to bring along processes such as this, and that cannot be, you know, that would not be threatened by such political power. I think that we need to try and empower them and help them understand how much it would advance them. And I think that the more we do at Bar-Ilan, and the more we let it known what we're doing, then it would be easier. It would help strengthen other institutions. So I think that in Israel we're dealing with a very political public sphere on the one hand, and with a very proactive public sphere on the other. And it's you have to be wise and brave to do this pacing and leading in such a way that will actually advance these things more. And sometimes trying to do even a little more can actually set us back.
Counterproductive. Right. Okay.
Right.
I totally hear you. So we'll ask, I guess, now I'm debating. I have a few more questions listed and I have to choose one because I'm looking at the clock. So it's hard to choose. I think I'm going to skip the Corona question because
we talked about Corona a lot, so I think we could skip that.
So I'll skip that too. And I'll ask you. This was a very, you know, you sounded very harmonized this past hour in our conversation. Everything was nice. We were all good. There were no objections. No one. And I want to ask you to share with us here live one thing that you really didn't feel comfortable with, or one thing that you felt, oh, I hope this would have been different or should be done different, or maybe a minute you were insulted. I just feel that maybe it's me, but something about the way you framed everything sounds just a little too good to be true. So I want to ask, where did you feel a kvetch?
I'll say something about a kvetch, but I have to say something about how I work or how I live in this world. I'm usually focused on the good. I don't know why I don't know. but I really feel that when you're focused on the good and what can be, then you achieve more. That's how I feel. But I'll tell you where the kvetch was, or maybe even still is. It's very tiring to explain again and again who I am, what I'm doing, why I'm here, what I think we can do. When you're a rabbi and you're introduced, this is the rabbi, then you're always referred to as the rabbi. And there's always a certain respect. It's like this, you're a rabbi. And people tend to either help you along a little more, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, and I'll be very happy to speak to some of my male colleagues. But I have a feeling that it's a little more difficult. It's a lot more difficult for me because it's much less formal. We don't know yet what this means. There was actually a Zoom with a lot of people on the Zoom, a lot of professors and a lot of people on the Zoom, and the person facilitating the Zoom, they asked me to come in to give a Dvar Torah, and the person facilitating the Zoom said, introduced me and then said, "We can call you Devora, right?" Now, no one would ever ask a rabbi, you know, "We can call you David, or we can call you whatever." And I felt very uncomfortable, not because I need to be called Rabbanit Dvorah. I'm fine with my name. I love it. But because it was the context in which it was done that made me feel very uncomfortable. And it made me feel uncomfortable because of the role, because it's very difficult to bring in a new role, and then the facilitator it's undermining it. It's counterproductive, and I felt very uncomfortable. But then again, what are you going to say? No. You have to call me Rabbanit. that makes very uncomfortable as well. But what I did say, and I hope that it's okay, I did say, well, the role I'm fulfilling is of Rabbanit Dvorah Evron, the voice on campus, feminist Torani voice on campus. That's what I said.
You say.
And he realized it, and he said Rabbanit Dvorah. And it's fine. I mean, when I meet him, he says Dvorah, which is fine. But the context was inappropriate, and it's an example. It happens.
Okay. You gave us a kvetch, even two. Thanks for sharing that with us. So before I make one closing remark, do you want to make a closing remark, Rabbanit Dvorah Evron?
Thank you. I think there's always, I want to say something to the students, that's the young women studying in the Midrasha. In 1984, I received a excellent scholarship from the Midrasha. And it was one of the highlights in my academic life and in my early years. And I did not dream. I also spoke on behalf of all the recipients of the scholarship. And standing there, I did not dream that one day I would have a rabbinic role on campus. And when I started learning halakha, I did not dream of it either. And I want to say to all the young students, the Torah is yours, and Am Yisrael needs your leadership. Am Yisrael needs you if this is something that your heart is set on, because you can be a leader in other places, of course. If this is something that your heart is set on, then please embark on this adventure. I'll be happy to help you think about, the steps. There are other, of course, women and men, even on this Zoom, that will be happy to help you, and realize that there is something that each and every one of you has to bring. It won't always be easy, but I can promise you that it will always be fulfilling. You will always have a sense that your life is meaningful, and that, and even certain moments where you feel that Hashem is smiling down on you.
So, wow, thank you very much for those warm words and encouraging words, Rabbanit Dvorah. I want to end really with the last pasuk of the Haftarah this week. The last pasuk of the Haftarah is in Micha. And I was thinking of Belda when I was looking at it, because of the order that the pasuk brings the different qualities of a person to the world. And it's a famous pasuk. Higid lecha adam ma tov u'ma Hashem doresh mimcha ki im asot mishpat ve'avat chesed ve'atznei alechet im Elohecha. And I think that Belda really, that was the order, that was the sequence. It was first of all im asot mishpat. It was be very, very faithful to the justice. And it was with gunot, and it was in other areas, but it was really, some people twist it. Some people are first they're kind, and first they're nice. Belda was first of all, in my mind, very, very clear about things that had to be done in a way that made justice to, and Abigail said it correctly, to the Orthodox world. She wanted to see everything done within the Orthodox world, not giving anyone the capability to escape out of it. But it was clear, kodem kol asot mishpat. And the second thing was a lot of chesed, ahavat chesed, which she did full-hearted. And I think Marcel's and the family's donation of the auditorium to Midrasha was part of this chesed. They had a lot of chesed in the world, and their naming everywhere is clear evidence for that. And hatznei alechet im Elohecha. And I want to say something, this is very tricky. To many people, Belda's presence was what they saw. But I want to say that when I met her one-on-one, I always felt that there was something so humble about what she brought of herself to the conversation. She was so curious to hear whether it was my point of view or other women's point of view. I was much younger. I was just starting my position. I was deputy director when I was for a year in the States before I became the head of the Midrasha. And it was really, really important for her to hear, to really sit and have a heart-to-heart conversation, and to hear what I thought. And I wasn't the only one, I was one of many. And in that way, I think she was extremely humble. She really wanted to hear many different voices before then bringing out to the forefront what she thought was the next right thing to do, or what had to be pushed ahead. So in my mind, this exactly was, this I'm telling to Rabbanit Leah, it was coincidental when this event was to take place, but they make the last pasuk of the word of the wording of our Haftarah, ki masot mishpat, ve'avat chesed, ve'atznei alechet im Elohecha, seems to me like a very fitting ending, not only for the Haftarah, but also to really remember Belda, and to have her in some way recognized among us here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Leah, are you?
Thank you very much. You have brought up many interesting points and opened up to new ways of thinking. May this evening be an aliyah for Belda's neshama, and we hope to begin a new year with continued good health and return to a normal routine. Thank you for all of us, all of you. Thank you very, very much. אני אגיד בעברית, תודה רבה 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 לכולם. ובאמת, שניפגש בבריאות ופנים אל פנים, face to face. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Leah, for sitting within that auditorium so we get a glimpse of what it looks like, making the effort.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the zchut to be a part of Belda's memory and to be here with all of you.
Good night.
Good night.